going to be taking us through a bit of scripture from the Hebrew scriptures, so what the Christians call the Old Testament, in part because I have been reading a phenomenal book, which is women writers writing about pieces of scripture from the Hebrew scriptures, and I've just been finding them very surprising and unexpected and sort of helpful and illuminating. And the one that we're going to be doing this evening is about Hannah. So it's in 1 Samuel, Samuel the prophet. You may or may not remember there was that scene where Samuel was under the sort of mentorship of a priest called Eli, and God calls out, Samuel, Samuel, and Samuel thinks it's Eli calling out rather than God, gets the wrong end of the stick. So his mum, Hannah, arguably also a prophet, in fact, and she is deeply desiring to have a child, and she seems to be unable to have a child. So this is like a longing in her, I guess, to be a mother, and she's hurt by not having this come to fruition. And so she is up in the temple one day, and Eli is there, and she does this sort of amazing thing, and I hadn't really realized how amazing it was until I read this book, because at the time that she was there, so the time when 1 Samuel is written, the sort of conventions around what happens in the temple were all to do with sacrifice as the public form of worship. So sort of personal, private prayers uttered to God just did not happen in that space. Institutionalized prayer had not appeared. And so what Hannah does in pitching up to the temple and uttering quietly, her lips are moving, it says, but she can't be heard, quietly, this prayer of longing and upset and sadness. She utters this to God in this place, and in a sense, therefore, her boldness and her imagination that has given her permission to speak to God so intimately, I guess, in a place which had traditionally been to do with the priestly caste of people offering sacrifices, was quite a sort of radical act. And this understanding sort of shifted my experience of spending a bit of time with this scripture. So what I thought we'd do this evening is I'm just going to guide you through, as ever, the piece of scripture with some prompts and invite you and your imagination to sort of see how it emerges, see what you notice and what strikes you, what it stirs up in you. But before that, I'll just read through the passage itself. It's a little bit long, but just so that you have a sense of the story that we're going to be basing it on. So there was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zophite, from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zoph, an Ephraimite. He had 2 wives. One was called Hannah, and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. When Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, "Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" This husband of hers clearly does not quite understand the depth of what is troubling Hannah. Once when they finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house, so this is the temple. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. And as she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. So maybe for those of you who want to turn your videos, who haven't already, feel free, if that's helpful for you to sort of tune in or focus. It might be useful to close your eyes or pick a point to focus on, something that helps you to tune into the sort of imaginative space. And maybe taking a minute or so just to get back in touch with that breath of yours and that heartbeat that we tuned into earlier. And again, maybe briefly tuning into how you are. You named something of that not long ago. And this evening we're going to be praying with an example of someone whose heart was moved by God, whatever it is we mean by God, a God who gives people courage, who helps people to express their deep desires, even when they might be countercultural or counter-religious. So just for a minute, notice for yourself, how is that God, that mystery, that heart opener around for you this evening? And notice, what is it that you desire? Given how you are, and given this sense of God, what is it that you want for this time? And ask for that. So I'm going to invite you to Allow your imagination to begin to paint the scene, to tune into this woman, Hannah, maybe in her home. Now, it might be that you're tuning into a scene which is of the time. It might be actually that it's somewhere contemporary or somewhere in your own life. Just trust whatever comes to your imagination. But begin to allow this woman's home life to emerge in your imagination. Where does she live? What sort of building is she living in? Or maybe you find that your imagination is seeing her out on a walk somewhere or at the market. Where is she for you? What are the things that you can see? The sounds that you can hear? And what are you noticing that Hannah is like? What's she wearing? What's her stature? Her colouring? And we're told that she has a husband who loves her, a husband who also has another wife who has children where she does not. So there's sort of lots of family around. But that often she is weeping, downhearted. How do you notice this in her? And so just noticing however it is that she's appearing to you, her manner, her character. And then we're going to change the scene. So she's up at the temple. There's just been a meal shared and she's stood up. And Eli, the priest, is sitting on the chair by the doorpost of the temple, the Lord's house. And Hannah is deeply anguished. And she knows the customs of the temple of her time. She knows what's meant to happen there. But somehow something in her is drawing her onwards, stirring her to have this conversation with God. What do you notice about what moves her to make that prayer from the depths of her heart? What other emotions are going on in her? Is she afraid, unashamed, tentative? And what is God like for her, this God who she pours her heart out to? What is their relationship like? This relationship that crosses boundaries, defies expectations. And what are you noticing that's being stirred up in you as you maybe watch or are present to this encounter? Or maybe you're even finding yourself in the place of Hannah. How are you feeling about this experience, this act, this voice that she has? Are you noticing that you're admiring of her, or feeling like she probably shouldn't be doing that? Maybe you notice desires stirring in you. And if you were in Hannah's shoes, what would those deep desires, those longings of your heart be that you would like to ask for, to let God know? I'm just going to leave a little bit of quiet for you to sort of be there, possibly with Hannah and God, or just yourself and God, and have a bit of a conversation. Notice what's going on in you. What do you want to ask? What do you want to say? Or maybe there's just a companionable being together. Or maybe you've marched off in a huff. Whatever's going on for you, just going to leave some quiet moments to stay with that. And if you're noticing yourself wandering off, getting distracted, that's okay. Just bring yourself back to Hannah, back to yourself. And that conversation, maybe that question of what's been stirring in you. And maybe if they haven't already, if Hannah or God had something to say to you, what might that be? And it might not be words. And how might what's been emerging for you in this time be related to your life here and now in the 21st century, in the midst of everything that's going on? Are there any links or connections that you might be noticing? Seems to me we might be in need of some prophets in today's world. People who are deeply in tune with and honouring of their truths, their intuition, and daring to live out of those, even if countercultural, counter-religious. So maybe for now, just noticing how you take your leave of this scene. Are there any final words or gestures And as ever, giving thanks for whatever has or hasn't happened, for showing up, for being present. And in your own time, coming back into this joint space, maybe flicking on your camera as and when you're ready.